stop, back-to-back massive disasters are keeping thousands of Red Cross volunteers working tirelessly to provide food, shelter, and comfort to tens of thousands of people. And our work is just beginning because we will be providing this support for weeks and weeks to come. For example, last Sunday night, the Red Cross and our partners provided nearly 24,000 people with hotel rooms and shelters across 7 states. Even in the midst of a global pandemic, our Red Cross volunteers have stepped forth to serve. In addition to the incredible support of our disaster-trained volunteers, we also wish to thank the incredible support of our donors, many of whom are on this call this morning. Our ability to deliver our mission is supported by you, and we are grateful. Today, I have a special announcement, and I would like to thank a very special donor, a fellow Tiffany Circle member from our Florida Gulf Coast to Heartland chapter. This generous donor is presenting a $25,000 challenge match for our call today. So for every dollar collected, our donor will match it up to $25,000, hence doubling the impact of her gift. So please, take a moment and consider making a donation to Red Cross at redcross.org, because wildfires, floods, and hurricanes don't wait. Right now, some 50 large fires continue to burn on the West Coast up to the Northwest. Thousands of people have been evacuated and are depending upon the American Red Cross for our assistance. In California, the Bobcat fire has forced as many as 4,000 people from their homes, and evacuation notices and warnings are still being issued for additional areas, including the entire city of Pasadena. In other areas, some people are now returning to their neighborhoods and to see that their homes and everything that they have owned has been destroyed, engulfed by smoke and flames. The Red Cross has mobilized a massive effort across several states. We have more than 1,300 volunteers working around the clock to ensure that people have a safe place to stay, food to eat, and a way to receive essential life care services. With us today, we have a very special guest, Joanne Nolan, the CEO of the LA region, which serves more than 10 million residents in 88 cities across Los Angeles County. Joanne is a native Floridian and has been with the Red Cross for 3 years, and as many of you on the call know, previously served as our CEO for the South Florida region. Joanne is here to share firsthand updates from the front lines in California about our humanitarian efforts. Welcome, Joanne.
Thank you, Julia. It's wonderful to be here, and I really appreciate a chance to connect with my home state of Florida. I'm so glad I can tell you a little bit about the work being done of the Red Cross in Oregon, in California, and Washington. The West has been on fire for the last 4 weeks. I cannot fully explain how devastating these wildfires are. You know, when we talk about damages, whether it's minor, major, or destroyed, fires have one level, and that is just completely destroyed. In fact, we've had 3 towns that have just been completely destroyed. So I've learned a lot over the last 4 weeks about fires, and one, they move incredibly fast. So the one word that we tell all of our residents is when the evacuation order comes, go. And we also spend a lot of time talking about that preparedness, just like we do with all of our disasters. Have that bag ready, have your plan ready, stay informed. Some extra things that we do with fires is point your car in the direction of your evacuation route. Pack it, have it ready to go. Have your pet your dog or your cat, have them in a bedroom. Close that door so that you can easily grab and run. And still there are some that are reluctant to go. But as much as I've seen that, I've also seen how essential the Red Cross is. We are the first person they see when they're evacuating to the evacuation point. They're incredibly frightened. What's going on? And there's a Red Cross volunteer with their vest, handing them water, saying, we're going to work on your plan. We're going to get you somewhere safe. And that Red Cross symbol continues to be that universal power of symbol of hope. So in California, these fires all started in August. It was a series of lightning storms. It quickly moved and created what they call complex fires, which were multiple fires coming together. Unfortunately, these fires will go down for the largest amount of acres burned in California history. The conditions, it's been very dry, there's been heat waves, winds are strong, and unfortunately, this is the beginning of fire season. So this is not, that some of the area it's burning has not burned in 60 years, so it's like kindling. As well as these forests that are burning, it's very steep and it's inaccessible. So for this incredible effort by CAL FIRE and all of the partners around the country that are coming in, it's very difficult to get to these fires. One area that everyone was very concerned about, and so far we're able to hold it, there's something called the Mount Wilson Observatory in Los Angeles. And it has home to one of the crown jewels of astronomy, but more important, it has multiple towers and a huge infrastructure that transmits cell phones, television signals, radio broadcasts across this greater Los Angeles area. And CAL FIRE has put out a war against the fire to protect that vital part. So what happens when these fires first start? We are there from the moment. We jump into action. And you know, one thing about Red Cross, we don't wait to raise the money, right? We jump in, we stand up these operations, and they're significant. So we are there setting up what we call temporary evacuation points. These are safe places in a large parking lot where we direct cars in, we give them a snack, we give them information, we make sure they're safe, and then we see what their needs are. Do they need a hotel? What supplies do they need? Do they have medical needs? What concerns? We have our mental health services there, with spiritual care there. And for many of them, we're able to put them in what we call non-congregate sheltering, which is a hotel, much safer during this COVID times. But when we put them in a hotel, we don't just leave them there and say good luck. We are there 3 times a day delivering them a warm meal for them. We are there giving them mental health services. We're seeing a strong need for that. We're checking in on their health services. Do you need medication? How can we help? And our nurses are there to support that. And it's all of the wraparound services. And I think one of the biggest things we can do is we're just that ear. How are you? How are you doing? Because we're already there talking about what their recovery is going to look like. So this has been, because of COVID, like every person and company and organization, we had to rewrite a lot of our protocols. How do we still deliver our mission? So we have completely new protocols, all new training. So when these fires erupted, and it very quickly took over the entire West Coast, the call went out for volunteers. We quickly needed to round up as many volunteers as we could. Knowing that the conditions are, you're wearing PPE and social distancing and the air quality is poor and we're taking you away from your family, the response from volunteers has been overwhelming. We have been able to meet all of our volunteer needs, not only from California and the West Coast, but from across the country. In fact, I know there's some folks from South Florida that are here right now. And that's the power of the Red Cross Network. We had, I was thinking about this family we had, and they came, and they had one of the girls in the family had very high anxiety issues. And the one thing that was important to her and that soothed her was her ukulele. So the mental health workers were talking with her. She had not been able to bring it with her. And her parents were very concerned because she was just so upset. So the call went out to music stores in Los Angeles. And when this one music store heard what we were trying to do, they said, we're on our way. And they brought the ukulele to this girl. And there she sat strumming. And just for a moment, that family knew that we were there. They could take their time to start working on their recovery. So now I have deployed for a few hurricanes. So when I arrived here after a few weeks, they asked if I could deploy to the Bay Area near San Francisco. And one of the challenges that I saw is this is in the Bay Area in Santa Cruz and Napa. It's a very large farming community. So there's a lot of migrant workers. Unfortunately, they weren't comfortable coming to any of the shelters or evacuation points or seeking help. So we engaged something in the Red Cross called the Latino Engagement Team. And these are trained volunteers who are specifically there to help those who maybe don't speak English, but also all the other cultural challenges that come along. And we created a mobile center, and we drove into the communities where they knew they were staying in tents and by the river. And we were able to provide them those services. So I love about the Red Cross, we just find a way. We find a way, what we say, to get to yes. So the last thing is recovery. And Julia mentioned this, as these families begin to return home, as evacuation orders are lifted, we are there with them. These folks don't have much, so we're able to give them, a new word I learned is these sifters. And these are wooden frames with a screen that we build, the Red Cross builds. And because it's Red Cross, we write little messages of hope on the sides. So we give them these sifters and these rakes and gloves and shovels so that when they return back to their home site, they can try to salvage something out of their homes. That may be some small memento that they can cherish. We will continue to work with these clients for many months as they begin that path to recovery and the resources that they are going to need. And that you, as our donors, that you are the only reason that we can provide that. So the next few days here in Los Angeles should give us a better sense. We've got some weather conditions that don't look good for us, so we're ready. We are still ramping up. We plan to be here. We will respond how we need to, when we do. And I want to thank you. We only can do this because of you. We only can be there and prepared and trained and have the resources and the food and the medical and the warm smiles because donors like you care about us. So Julia, back to you.
Thank you, Joanne. The LA region is so fortunate to have you there leading so boldly on behalf of the American Red Cross. And we sure do miss you in South Florida and wish you well out there with all your efforts. And even though we know that fires are devastating and have caused unprecedented damage, we've also been facing the worst track record for hurricanes in the United States on record. So far, we've already experienced 23 named storms. In fact, forecasters are now using the Greek alphabet for storm names, which is the first time since 2005 that has actually occurred. So joining us today to speak to us a little bit about hurricane recovery is Chuck Parker, the Regional Disaster Program Officer for the South Florida region. Chuck first joined the American Red Cross as a disaster volunteer and board member, and later became a staff and team member in 2011. Chuck has just returned from his deployment following Hurricane Laura and is here to share with us some of his firsthand experiences and situations where he has seen incredible need. Welcome, Chuck. We're really glad to have you here with us this morning.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just a couple of things first before we get into Laura. I thought it interesting. There are currently 51 individual disaster relief operations going on across the country, and I know out west they've combined several of the fires, multiple DROs into single ones now. So the reality is, I think it's obviously one of the busiest times we've had for disaster. In the last month here from South Florida, we've deployed 50 individuals to 62 different assignments across the country. That, if you do the math, that means at least a dozen people, or I guess could be less than that. A dozen people have done multiple deployments in the last month. We have some of my team that are some of the DCS paid staff that have currently moved from a Southeastern Caribbean disaster as Sally has stabilized some, and they've now deployed to the West Coast to assist the fires out there. So just in an average year here in South Florida, we have 1 to 2 level 2 and above disaster relief operations in the region, and so far in this calendar year, we've had 8 so far, including the COVID-19. We've had 2 tropical systems, 2 multifamily fires, 2 flooding events, separate flooding events, and 1 wildfire. So, everything this year is a superlative. And if you're in the disaster business, it means you're really busy, but it's also great for job security. So, that's the upside. So I want to talk just a little bit about Laura. My particular role in Laura, I got a phone call. Laura had moved far enough south, to give you the historical background, had moved far enough south that it was appearing that it was not going to be a threat for us. I think Key West stayed in the window for the longest amount of time, and we were monitoring that closely and working through the commitments that we have in the Keys and with our team. And then, when it became obvious that it was going to miss us, then we breathed a sigh of relief. But then the downside from that is then there are other people in the country who realize that you just ended up with a lot of free time on your hands. And so I received a call asking if I would consider going to Louisiana. They had a specific role in mind for me. And I had to think about it for a while, because it was a in-person assignment. It couldn't be done virtually. And after I said, well, give me an hour to think it over and talk it over with my wife, and then I'll get back to you. So I actually went to when I originally made my travel plans, I had booked my travel into Baton Rouge, and then I got a call from our resource mobilization, RMS, and they said you can't fly in at that time because the airport's going to already be closed. So I ended up leaving my house at about 3:30 a.m. Wednesday morning in order for me to get a flight into Atlanta to catch the last Delta flight into Baton Rouge before the airport closed. And it's one of the bumpier flights that I've been on in a while, but that allowed me to get in pre-landfall. I don't necessarily recommend that for folks. You may want to wait till post landfall when you can better assess things. But that allowed me to at least get some things situated for my role. My role was the itinerant deputy AD of response for operations, and that within that role, I was to go down to Lake Charles. They were anticipating Lake Charles was going to be ground zero for the damage from the hurricane, and I went there the day after. Well, landfall came at about 1:30, I think, in the morning. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I was in Lake Charles, and wasn't able to secure lodging or anything that day, and was back into Baton Rouge that night and back in Lake Charles again every day. Lake Charles was where I spent my entire deployment. I was able, after a couple of days, to secure a hotel room in Lake Charles because I was willing to stay in a hotel that had no electricity and no water. And I don't recommend that either. We were flushing toilets with water from waste baskets that they placed a trash barrel of water at the end of the hallway, and you'd go with your waste basket and get your water to flush your toilet with. But the good news was they were able to get internet service pretty quickly, and so I at least had internet service there, and that was gave me a base for where I could operate. We went around. My job was to try to improve flow at some of our work sites. We were doing a lot of bulk distribution. We were at locations where we co-located with the National Guard, and that was putting stresses on the system. The National Guard, young healthy guardsmen, and they had busloads of them, and they were just burying us as far as speed goes. And the amount of bulk that we were able to push out in 3 or 4 days there. We got meals up and running within 48 hours. We were serving hot meals. We were providing bulk items for folks. There's still, one of the things I noticed when I went into Lake Charles was the damage was very similar to Michael in North Florida. I was also in North Florida pre-landfall for Michael, and the damage was similar. It was a little smaller in scale. The storm wasn't as wide as what Michael was, but power poles and power lines down, just the amount of destruction that led to displacing folks. And then the second piece of that was, unlike Michael in North Florida, the people weren't there. They weren't sitting around in their yards like they were in Michael and sitting around in their garages. They had not been able to get back home. There's still 15,000 people that are in hotel rooms and other sheltering operations in Louisiana. They still haven't been able to return home. That's a slow process. And it's an expensive process to get people back into their homes. So just my appeal to you as donors is, we do the best job we can with the amount of money we have. I see many times that we're able to be very efficient with the donor dollar, and I know it's a top concern for all the folks that are out in the field. But the work that's done with those dollars is important work, and I could talk all day, but they're not going to let me. The big hook just came in, and so if you have any questions, we'll be on for a while, be able to answer questions. So thank you, Julia. Back to you.
Thank you, Chuck. I think our big takeaway here for all our participants on the call and session today is those we'll never quite look at a trash bucket the same way. And of course, I'm sure you were without your air conditioning also. And we know it was dreadfully, dreadfully hot during that time of your deployment. So thank you for your firsthand account of that effort. We appreciate your service so very much. For everyone on the call today, I just want to remind you that the American Red Cross is not a governmental agency, and that we are dependent upon the generosity of our donors in order for us to fulfill our mission. Donors such as our Tiffany Circle member, who has issued her $25,000 challenge grant. Please consider making a gift right now at redcross.org. And for every dollar that you contribute, it will be matched up to $25,000, therefore doubling the impact of this gift. The Red Cross is the greatest humanitarian organization in the world. Your gifts help us fulfill our mission of preventing and alleviating human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of our donors. Because of your support, the American Red Cross, through our incredibly strong network of volunteers, donors, and partners, is ever present in times of need, so that we are able to turn compassion into action. Please consider making a donation today at redcross.org. It's been my sincere pleasure to be here with you today to share some of the amazing work of the American Red Cross. At this time, I would like to turn the call over to Rosemary Critchfield-Leone, who will open the lines for questions that you may have. Thank you to Joanne and Chuck, who are participating in that Q&A session. And Rosemary, back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julia. As of now, there are no questions in the chat. So please, if you have any questions, you can either drop them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask them directly to any of the participants. I would suggest to direct your question to whoever the speaker that you're asking it to.
Rosemary, I see a question in the chat box.
I see.
Oh, yeah. Question for Chuck, sorry. When did you arrive in Louisiana and when did you leave, and how did the COVID-19 pandemic affect your operations?
So I arrived Wednesday morning, the 26th. Got in about 11 o'clock in the morning. The Baton Rouge airport closed at 12 noon. I left, I think, the day after Labor Day, which was the 7th or 8th, sometime around there. I could talk a long time about how COVID-19 affected the operations. One of the jobs that I found myself tasked with was, as I went around to the various work sites, I needed to make sure that we were following our protocols, including social distancing and masks. And I know one of the work sites I went up to, it was very hot. We were in a parking lot. It was a heat index of 108, 109 degrees that day. And there was one of the Red Cross volunteers was standing in the parking lot, and I asked him, he's the only one I saw. I asked him if he was there by himself. And he had he said, well, the person that's with me, I don't see her right now. And then we saw her in the parking lot, and I went over to her. She wasn't wearing a mask. And I said, will you put your mask on? And she said, well, I had to take it off. It got wet from sweat, and having myself had to change out masks a couple of times. It's like being waterboarded when your mask is wet from sweat and you're trying to wear it. So I went and got her a mask. When I came back to her, she was clearly distressed from the heat. Put her in my car in the air conditioning, and she was not responding well. There was a National Guard work group that was there, and I asked them if they had a medic with them, and the guy that was leading that, a lieutenant, I believe he was, said, well, we don't have a medic with us, but he said, I'm an EMT in the real world. And so he came over, he looked at her, we made a decision to take her to the hospital. Ambulances weren't running at that time. And so he took her in his National Guard vehicle. She went to the hospital where they rehydrated her, and she was out in a few hours. But so the masks were an issue. Constantly reminding people, wear your mask, social distance. Those were a lot of the factors that COVID-19 impacted us with.
Thank you, Chuck. Here's another question for you from Ron Blank. Are the shelters in Louisiana managed by the Red Cross or parish employees?
So this disaster was interesting in that they did not open any shelters pre-landfall, and so the immediate model that the state of Louisiana went to was non-congregate sheltering, and so they started putting people in hotels. That was stretched after a while, and they were no longer able to do that. They did end up opening some shelters, and it was a mix of Red Cross supporting and Red Cross managing. We opened a couple of mega shelters. We opened one down in New Orleans. We opened one up in Alexandria. And the non-congregate shelters have all been turned over to the Red Cross now. And I believe all sheltering currently that's being done in Louisiana is being done by the Red Cross.
Thank you, Chuck. Any other questions, either in the chat or unmute your microphone and ask directly to any of the speakers or the FD staff? Oh, here's another question for Chuck from Steve King. Chuck, did you bridge response between virtual and in-person operations?
Yes, that was essentially my job. The assistant director of operations was virtual, as was some of the leadership team. And then when the leadership team began to have more of a in-person footprint, that was done from Baton Rouge. There was no infrastructure at all down in Lake Charles, and so I was the eyes and ears of the operations team in Lake Charles. You know, working through what sites were going to be good service delivery sites. Working with the EOC, I checked in with the EOC at least a couple of times a day, and it went to scope out new sites, went to troubleshoot at existing sites. We got kicked out at 2 different National Guard locations because we weren't going fast enough, and so you know, I'm an operations guy, so I went in to try to get us able to handle our products, our bulk products, more efficiently, and you know, we were able to get a lot of product delivered. Although I wasn't able to keep us at the National Guard site. The captain came running over at one point and wanted to know who was in charge there, and everybody pointed at me, and so we had to have a chat where I was lectured by the National Guard captain about how I was disrupting his entire operation. So we, you know, worked with the operations team then to find us a better location for bulk delivery where we weren't going to impact somebody else's operation.
Thank you, Chuck. We're running out of time. It's 10:33. So back to you, Jasmine.
Thank you, Rosemary. Well, that concludes our meeting. Thank you for joining everyone and have a great evening.